On the last afternoon of his life, James Dean was heading somewhere. Not to a film set, not to a premiere, not to any of the places that had made his name something the world knew. He was driving north to Salinas, California, to a racing event, and somewhere in the day's plan was a visit to a friend. Just that. Just a person he wanted to see. James Dean was 24 years old when he died in September of 1955. He had been famous, in the full modern sense of the word, for less than a year. East of Eden had come out that spring. Rebel Without a Cause would not open until after his death, Giant not until the following year. He was at the beginning of what most people assumed would be a long career, the kind of career that would give him decades to figure out who he was and what he wanted his life to look like. By most accounts, from people who knew him during those years, the friends he had made in New York when he was still a struggling actor, the closer ones who had known him before the world did, James Dean was someone who took friendship seriously. Not in an effusive, always available way. He could be difficult, withdrawn, moody in ways that made closeness complicated. But when he connected with someone genuinely, the connection was real. He remembered things. He called. He showed up. He was, underneath the restless exterior, someone who valued being known, genuinely known, not as a symbol or a movie star or a projection of what the culture needed him to be, but as himself. The friend he was going to see that day had known him from before the movies, before the magazine covers, before the name meant what it was coming to mean. That kind of friendship, the kind that predates the public version of a person, that holds the memory of who someone was before the world decided who they were, tends to matter more than most other kinds. It offers something no amount of new admiration can provide. It says, "I knew you when. I know the version the world doesn't see, and I'm still here, still glad to see you." That was the visit James Dean was moving toward. Not a performance, not a transaction. Just two people who had been real to each other in the particular way that old friendships make possible, meeting in the ordinary way of people who have not yet realized there is any urgency. There is something about that image, a young man in a fast car on his way to see a friend, in the unhurried way of someone who assumes there will be many more days like this one, that carries a particular kind of sorrow. Not the theatrical kind, the quiet kind. The sorrow of a visit that would never happen, and the friend who would spend the rest of his life knowing that. Maybe you felt something like this. Maybe there is a friendship in your life that you've been meaning to tend. Someone you care about, someone you think about, someone you'd call a friend without hesitation. And yet, the last time you actually sat with them and talked, really talked, was longer ago than you'd like to admit. Not because anything has changed between you, just because life has its own momentum, and the friendships that ask the least of you in the short term are often the ones that quietly accumulate the longest gaps. The particular cruelty of this is that old friendships, the ones that have survived the most time and the most change, are precisely the ones that need the least formal maintenance. You can go months without speaking and pick up almost exactly where you left off, which is wonderful. But it also means that months become years, without anyone intending it, because the comfort of knowing the door is always open can become a reason to not quite walk through it right now. Here's something gentle to consider. The door being always open is true until it isn't. People move, people get sick, people's lives shift in ways that narrow the available time and energy for connection, even with people they love. The assumption that there will always be time for this particular conversation, this particular visit, this particular phone call, that assumption is one of the more common forms of loss that people carry into the later chapters of their lives. Most of the conversations people most regret not having happened with people who were completely available to have them. Not unavailable, not unwilling. Simply not called, not visited, not quite reached for, because there was always time, until there wasn't. James Dean was 24 and moving fast and probably not thinking about urgency. Why would he? He had his whole life in front of him. Years and years of future conversations with the friend he was going to see. The visit he was making wasn't precious because it was the last. It was precious because it was what real friendship looks like when it's tended. Two people who know each other well, choosing to spend some of an ordinary day together, for no reason except that they matter to each other. That's what most friendships need to survive and stay alive. Not grand gestures, not elaborate plans, just the ordinary choosing of each other, regularly, unhurriedly, without waiting for a special occasion. Maybe this week is the week to reach out to the friend who's been in the back of your mind, the one you think about more than you call, the one you'd want at your side if something important happened, which means the one who should also be at your side, occasionally, when nothing particular is happening at all. There's also something worth sitting with here for people who feel like the old friendships are mostly gone, who have moved or drifted or lost people in ways that have left their social world smaller than it once was. The loss of friendship is a real grief, and one the world doesn't always make much space for. It doesn't have the formal weight of the loss of a spouse or a parent, but it can be just as quietly significant. The person who knew you most fully, who remembered the person you were before certain things happened, who was the witness to a particular chapter of your life, is no longer available in the way they once were. And that absence is real. If that's true for you, maybe this is a week to honor what those friendships were, not with grief, but with gratitude. To think, quietly, about what specific friendships gave you that you couldn't have had any other way. What they saw in you, what you saw in them. How those relationships made you more yourself in the way that the best friendships reliably do. And then to consider whether any of those connections, even the ones that have gone quiet for a long time, might still be reachable. Old friendships are surprisingly resilient. A message that says simply, "I've been thinking about you lately, and I miss talking to you," even after years, even after gaps that feel too long to bridge, tends to be received with warmth far more often than it's received with coldness. Because the other person has been carrying the gap too. They just weren't sure who should go first. Go first. Not because it's your responsibility, just because you're the one thinking about it. And that's enough of a reason. So take a slow breath. And maybe this week, reach out to the friend you've been meaning to call. Not for any particular reason, just to say, I'm thinking of you, and I'd like to hear your voice. That's always a good beginning. There's one more dimension to friendship worth sitting with, something that often gets overlooked. The question of what kind of friend you are. Not just whether you have friends. Because friendship, like most of the things that matter most, is something you give and receive at the same time. And sometimes the question worth asking isn't, why don't I have more close friendships? But what kind of presence am I in the friendships I do have? James Dean's friends remembered specific things about how he showed up for them. Not grand gestures, small ones. Remembering what someone had mentioned they were worried about and asking about it later. Showing up when he said he would. Paying attention in a way that people in public life, surrounded by admirers and demands, often gradually lose the capacity for. Being actually present in a conversation rather than performing presence while already thinking about the next thing. That kind of friendship, the kind where someone actually pays attention, actually remembers, actually shows up, is rarer than it should be. Not because people are selfish, but because life is busy and attention is finite, and it's easy to let the quality of presence drift downward over time without quite noticing. Until someone you love points it out, or until you notice it yourself in a moment of honesty. Maybe this week is a week for both things. For reaching out to the friend you've been meaning to call, and for being genuinely present when they answer. Not checking something else while you talk, not waiting for a pause to redirect the conversation to yourself. Just listening. Just being there. In the simple, quiet, increasingly rare way of a person who has decided that this conversation, this friend, this moment, deserves their full attention. James Dean was on his way to see a friend. He probably planned to be fully there when he arrived, to sit with someone who knew him, to talk about whatever came up, to be in the unhurried company of someone who didn't need him to be anything in particular. That's what the best friendships offer, and that's what the best friends offer back. The gift of full, unhurried, undivided presence. Of being genuinely seen and genuinely seeing. So take a slow breath. And maybe this week, reach out to the friend you've been meaning to call. Not for any particular reason. Just to say, I'm thinking of you, and I'd like to hear your voice. And when they answer, be fully there. That's always enough.